chug, 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 chug,
Done. Hello, and welcome back to the Wizard Staff. I'm your host, Guy.
And I'm Blake.
And we are two drunk novices who like to talk about EDH. We drink and swear, so you've been warned. Please drink responsibly when you're talking about children's card games. And tonight we will be talking a lot about children's card games because it is Commander Christmas, once again, in April. That's right, we're back at it with the Commander 2021 Pre Cons. And similar to last year, they're tied to a spring standard set, which is Strixhaven. But wait, there's more. We have today Nick and Zach from the Commander Theory joining us. Woo! Say hi, guys.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Hi, everybody.
Yes. If you haven't, I think by the time that we are releasing this episode, we will have Nick and Zach will have released the Strixhaven release kind of review with the legendaries, the 99, and Blake and I are on there, and we are now hosting Nick and Zach so we can talk about all the different cards that are going to be in Commander 2021. So that's very exciting. We'll go through each of the decks, kind of, what are they about, what are the new legendaries, and all the new kind of cards that are in the 99, as we've done every year. But first, what are we drinking tonight, boys?
So I'm drinking the Fin du Monde. It's a Belgian-style triple ale made by Unibrow Brewery.
Yeah, I'm gonna probably. I don't know. I'm drinking a reposado. I'm drinking some tequila tonight. I have some Terramana tequila. It was on sale, and I like tequila a lot, so that was great. I have just some little bits with lime, and then I made a limeade and mixed it with that too. So I'm trying not to drink it too fast because I made it really good.
Well, for me, I'm drinking Four Roses straight bourbon whiskey on the rocks.
Yeah,
it's a fun one. I was just like, let's just go for it. Might as well.
Yeah, honestly, that's a great. Yeah, love it.
Mm-hmm. I drank half a bottle of wine before we started, and that was just like some red extra that I've had from previous episodes, and now I just have like a glass of white wine. So, I'm pretty diverse in that way.
That's great.
Yeah. All right, so we're just going to get into it with our quick little introduction to Strixhaven. So, Strixhaven University is Arcavios' premier institution of magical learning, drawing promising young mages from all around the plane to study in its halls. Strixhaven is divided into 5 colleges, each with its own campus, faculty, and magical specialties. Each of the 5 colleges focuses on the clashing of 2 opposing mana colors. So that means we got the traditional Golgari, Boros, Izzet, Simic, and Orzhov colors. The mission of Strixhaven University is to discover and preserve magical knowledge, disseminate that knowledge from one generation to the next, promote the free and open study of magic in all its forms, and enhance the lives of magic through the plane through the use of magic. So, before we continue just a little bit, I'm kind of curious, but what are your guys' thoughts? Because we've seen this now with Ikoria, Zendikar, and Kaldheim, this tie-in with Commander Pre Cons that relate to a standard set. And do we like this concept that they're kind of doing? What are your thoughts?
I'd say that I like that it ensures that the main set mechanics are given their own commander, so you can build around the set mechanics that you're really excited about. You can have your Otrimi mutate deck or your Ranar Fortel deck or whatever. You can get the main set to work in Commander. I like that, and also I just like that we're getting more commander decks throughout the year. It's more opportunities for reprints. I think overall it's a really positive thing for the format, and I love that they've replaced the old Planeswalker decks, because I would never recommend anyone, even like a new player, to buy one of those products. But I would definitely recommend, pick up this commander deck, because you're going to be able to find people to play with so easily, and I think it's a really good thing for the format.
Yeah, I can cuss on this show, right? This is a
Hell
cussing
yeah.
show.
Please, fuck yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because these things fucking rip. They're so good. Like, the difference between the once a year, it could be from anywhere commander releases, and these ones tied to a standard set, like, is huge. They've been really stepping up their game with them. And like Nick said, it really does, with every set, introduce new decks to the format. So I've been a very big fan of this happenings, and I'm really excited to see the continuation of this as we move on, like, through Magic history.
Yeah, like WotC really has kind of figured out like how to build a commander deck now that it's growing in popularity, and they've kind of tuned it well enough to make these precons pretty good for a precon. And I like more is always better usually, so I'm excited. Let's talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I think you guys all nailed the head on this, or head on the nail, whatever. The alcohol's already been hitting me, as I've kind of mentioned, but yeah, I think this is pretty cool. It's an interesting concept, and I'm glad to see the Planeswalker decks go. I hope they never return. But let's get into some of the new mechanics. So we're going to quickly go through those because we've got a lot to talk about today. The first is Ward, which is a new evergreen mechanic that we'll be seeing, which is similar to Shroud and Hexproof. It's something where it isn't nearly as problematic, I guess, in terms of like interactability. So a card will have Ward on it, and it's kind of like an extra amount of mana, or you will either pay mana or pay life to counter an ability of a spell that targets a creature with Ward. And I think there's one or two cards that we'll be talking about later today, so we'll get to that. However, the main mechanic that we're kind of focused around is Magecraft, which is what Landfall is for lands and what Constellation is for enchantments. So Magecraft is similar in that it rewards a player for playing sorceries and instants. Note that it will trigger for every time you cast or copy a spell, so cards that have Storm on them are going to be pretty damn good. And then we also have another new mechanic in this set specifically that we didn't see in the main set of Strixhaven, which is Demonstrate. There is a 5-card cycle of Demonstrate cards in this deck that reads, when you cast this spell, you may copy it. If you do, choose an opponent to also copy it. Players may choose new targets for their copies. And we'll kind of go one by one when we get to the Demonstrate cards of whether or not we actually may see those outside of the precons. But let's get into it because we have so much we need to talk about. We have Lorehold Legacies. Blake, hit us with this first card.
All right, so this is the head of the basically Boros commander deck, and it is Osgir, I think. Osgir the Reconstructor. He is 2 red white for a 4/4 legendary creature, Giant Artificer with Vigilance. And then he has 2 activated abilities. So 1, sacrifice an artifact. Target creature you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn. And X, tap, exile an artifact card with mana value X from your graveyard. Create 2 tokens that are copies of the exiled card. Activate only as a sorcery. So I think we can all agree that this is a pretty unique Boros commander. Like, we typically think Boros like attacky, burn. But this is not doing any of that. This is kind of doing some artifact shenanigans, for lack of a better word, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that the most exciting thing to do with this guy involves Mirror of Fate. So Mirror of Fate is kind of like a forgotten card from core sets in the past. It's something that kind of like slipped under the radar, but it is 5 mana for an artifact. Tap, sacrifice Mirror of Fate. Choose up to 7 face-up exiled cards you own. Exile all the cards from your library, then put the chosen cards on top of your library. So if you just activate it once, it does a pretty good impression of Leveler in that it just exiles your library. You're probably not going to have a lot of exiled cards, but it's an interesting card because if you can somehow get 2 Mirror of Fates, then what you can do is basically like Doomsday and stack your library with up to 7 cards in the order you choose. So with Osgir, he gives you a mechanism for creating 2 Mirror of Fates, so then you can just basically like find the right Doomsday pile that'll let you win the game from there. So it's definitely like a kind of a complicated combo line, but I think that that's probably like the most powerful thing you can do with Osgir is just get that double Mirror of Fate action.
Yeah, this guy is crazy. I think even if you're like not specifically comboing with him, which I think knowing like most Commander players, I don't think they look at this guy and go like, "Oh, of course, Mirror of Fate."
I didn't know what that card
that's not
was
gonna be-
before then.
Yeah, it's a thing. It combos with a few other commanders, so this is not something that like me and Nick haven't encountered before, but definitely Osgir. Whenever you double anything, there's probably a combo involved. Like you can probably find a combo for it, and Osgir is pretty much no exception. So I just think that this is an incredibly powerful place to put Boros and or Lorehold. I don't think we're gonna stop saying Boros from now on. You know what I mean? But I think we're still gonna say Boros when we talk about like guild colors. But I honestly, from what I've seen with Osgir and the rest of Strixhaven and this deck that we're gonna talk about, like Lorehold forever. You know, like this is so much cooler than most everything that we've gotten up to this point from Boros.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's some interesting cards in this pre-con that, you know, you can use these doubling up on artifact shenanigans going on. I made a meme just about like, you know, sacrificing your soul ring to make 2 soul rings, but that's actually pretty good in terms of like trying to ramp yourself. So I like this. Like, it's definitely something new, and I think that there will be I think there will be some cool things that come out of this commander. This is already a good start, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Do we want to talk about the next commander? Because there's 2 Lorehold boys.
Yes, and that's actually an interesting note, kind of, because we got, in terms of like recent years, we've kind of had like 3 face commanders come out of the decks. Notably, there are only 2 commanders that like come out of this pre-con that can be your commander like straight out of the box. And I think they did that just because, you know, the 3rd commander was always kind of like a, you know, just kind of like a wash. It wasn't really something that, you know, many people would play. But we got Alabu, Ancient Witness, 3 red, white, legendary artifact creature golem. Other artifact creatures you control have haste. Whenever 1 or more artifact creatures you control attack, Alabu Ancient Witness deals X damage to any target and you scry X, where X is the number of tapped artifacts you control, and it's a 4/5. Alright, I mean, we were just kind of talking about how Lorehold is a little artifact-centric, and I think that this kind of fits in the themes, but what do you guys think?
I'd say, like, I love that it grants sort of incidental haste. I think that's fantastic. You know, being able to cast a Palladium Myrrh and immediately tap it for mana, or honestly, like a Metal Worker and immediately tap it for mana, that's really attractive to me. But the other ability just doesn't seem super powerful. Like dealing X damage to 1 target and scrying X is not an awesome payoff. And overall, I just don't think that this combination of abilities is really worth 5 mana. That's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna push back on that a little bit because I don't think this deck is about like a lot of like oh, what was his name? The blue red tokens become a token guy. What was that
Brutaclad?
name?
Brutaclad, yeah.
Brutaclad, yeah. So like Brutaclad was kind of like, here's a bunch of tokens, here are artifact tokens and stuff like that. Here's something weird, and we've yet to really see. Well, I mean, I guess we're gonna talk more, but we had been yet to really see like an artifact creature commander, and I think that's kind of what stood out about Alibu is that like, oh, well, this could be the like artifact creature commander. Like they all attack, you scry, and you deal damage, and I think that on its own is pretty bad. My cat is sitting right next to my microphone. I'm so sorry. If
We
you
have a
hear,
fifth guest, ladies and gentlemen.
if you hear Willow licking your butt, then that's I apologize.
Just like
But
raspily tonguing her starfish.
oh yeah, just it's just right in there. So what I do think Alibu is a like because you only need to attack with like a Thopter to get the benefit. So I think this is like red, white artifacts, and then I think you just tap your like mana rocks and get value out of it. Like you scry to find your combo piece, your Thopter hits for way more damage than it should. Like stuff like that. I don't actually think this is. I think it's going to play a lot more like a Kurkesh list where you're tapping artifacts, activating abilities, and then like if you have a scroll rack, you can scry away stuff, as opposed to like an aggro list, kind of like it looks like on the surface. Because the difference between playing and activating a Scarecrow in one turn is huge compared to like, here's my Scarecrow, hope you don't blow it up, and then they blow it up, and then you're screwed. So I actually think that if when we start seeing Alibu lists in the wild, it's gonna be not so much like aggro commander lists as much as like I have some artifacts, or I have some artifact creatures, but here is a bunch of like mana rocks that I tap to do a bunch of things.
Yeah, I have one more thing to add about this card. I don't know how the rest of you guys feel, but I was kind of intrigued about the fact that this Boros card said Scry on it, because, I mean, I'm sure you could find a few cards maybe, but to my knowledge that there's not that many Boros cards that say Scry on it, which is weird considering Scry is like an evergreen ability that almost any color identity can use. So I guess when I saw this card, I'm like, yeah, why haven't we seen Scry and Boros before? Every other color identity gets it. Like, what's up with that?
I don't know. I've been a proponent of like one of my fixes for white, which is not anything that any of your listeners might have heard, but like in our friend chats with like me and Nick, one of my fixes for white has been just have it scry at the ass, just like every other card scries. Just make sure if it's a white card, it scries. Like enchantments that scry effectively, all that kind of stuff. So seeing scry on this Boros card, I hope means that we're going to see scry on even more Boros and or white cards in the future, because yeah, they're giving white some card draw. What would help that card draw? Some scry and some card selection. You don't need to print all those scary I'm a white card and I draw cards when you also compare it with your charming princes, that like scry away the things you don't want. And then you can draw a card with the one white card you deem acceptable, wizards. So I'm hoping we see more of it.
Sweet.
With that being said, though, I think we can move on to our next new commander. Nick, why don't you take us away on this?
Sure. This is Laelia? Laelia?
Something.
The Blade Reforged, something along those lines, yeah. 2 and a red for a 2/2 legendary creature Spirit Warrior. She has haste, and when Laelia, the Blade Reforged, attacks, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. Whenever you exile one or more cards from your library and or your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on Laelia. How do you feel about this commander? Where do you think this archetype lands in the format? What's the deck going to look like? What are your thoughts?
Well, the best card for this deck is Underworld Breach, and I don't need to reiterate that just because Underworld Breach is probably the best card in general, in my opinion, at least. Because you'll be exiling cards from your graveyard to just make her bigger, and I think, if she can get up to 21, 21 attack.
I swear to God.
I think if she
you're gonna
can
say
get
it's
up
a
to
Voltron
21 attack,
commander, I'm
she's
gonna
going to
kick
be a
you in the
Voltron
ass.
commander.
No.
Oh,
Let me finish
God.
let me finish my thought. Come on.
I hate you.
So yeah. But no, I think this is pretty decent. Oh, yeah. What do you guys think? Voltron or not?
I think that I like the value. I like that she essentially lets you draw a card every turn. I think that getting her up to like, I mean, I guess you don't have to get her up to 21. You can always just like give her double strike and like double her power with like what's that thing from M21? That doubles power, Unleash Fury. So I guess there's some ways to cheat it a little bit. If you get like 4 counters on her and then like give her double strike and Unleash Fury, that'll do the trick. But I don't know. I am more interested in her as just like a draw a card every turn commander rather than like deal 21 commander damage commander.
Yeah, I mean, she can get big really fast, like crazy fast. There's a lot of ways to exile cards in red now. There's a lot of impulse draw. There's light up the stage. There's the one siege from Khans of Tarkir. There's just a lot of ways to just make this card big. That said, I don't, as a beatdown commander, I don't think it's as good as Godo. I don't think it's as good as Neheb 3.0. Like Neheb 3.0, the 5/4 trample for 4 mana. When it hits them, you pitch any number of cards, draw that many cards, and make that much red mana. Like that gives you gas. It gives you the mana to burn the gas with. Compared to this, which is just kind of like, I can make it really big. I can draw an extra card a turn, but I'm not. I'm not seeing as many cards in total. So
I'm
I
going to
think
need you
if
to
you
tie
want,
Laelia back to the gas metaphor for me to really understand your position.
I just don't think she's as good as these other commanders. If you want to do mono red beatdown, I think Godo and Neheb 3.0 are better. Like, yeah, she can get big fast, but that doesn't really matter because you have to put in a lot of work to make her big.
Yeah, like the fact that it says one or more cards and like your light up the stage is just like one additional counter on her.
Yeah,
means it's going to be slow going, I think.
Yep. But she does have haste, so she's fast.
Yeah.
She's big. Yeah.
Blakey, you got anything?
I will not be building this Voltron. I am sorry. We will move on to the next card.
All right.
Nice.
Who's next?
Is it me? Nice. Okay. This is Low Shield Clockwork Scholar. This is a 2/4 Elephant Artificer for 3 mana, 2 and a white. They have prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to attacking artifact creatures you control. And whenever one or more artifact creatures enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. So, yeah, what's everyone feeling?
So I looked up the first ability, and it's apparently the exact same as another card called Dolem Gate, but it's only for your artifact creatures. But I'm like, in all my years of playing Commander, I have never seen anyone ever play Dolem Gate. So the first ability I don't really care about. The second ability, I'm a little bit more hot on. However, the fact that it's like only once each turn, I'm like, come on, let me have a good mono white card, come on.
All right, I actually just put Dolmen Gate in a deck. Yes.
Yeah.
Shit.
So, yeah. I mean, I hadn't put in any decks in the 10 years prior to that, but I did just recently put it in my Essica God of the Tree deck as a way to like make it so that my mana dorks are able to attack safely and also and I just don't have to worry about them dying in combat. But to get to your point about it only triggering once per turn, I actually think that that's kind of a feature and not a bug. And the reason I say that is because I think, on our podcast, Commander Theory, available on Apple Podcasts and whatever you use to listen to your podcasts. We talk a lot about incentives, and I think if it didn't have that restriction, the incentive would be to cast as many artifact creatures as possible, and so you'd end up with a list that sort of looks a lot like a Joyra Weatherlight Captain list, where you're casting like a bunch of 0 and like 1 mana artifact creatures to try to get as many cards as possible, and you're sort of vomiting these things onto the board and like churning through your deck. And I think that the current design is actually a bit more fun because you actually get to play with the artifacts that you want to play with. Like you get to play with the cool artifact creatures that cost like 3, 4, 5 mana, like a Metalworker, like a Scarecrow, that kind of thing, as opposed to, you're just playing like Ornithopter and Memnite and Shield Sphere and using those to draw a bunch of cards. So I think this is actually a cool design. I'm down for this like once per turn trigger here.
Yeah, and kind of to double up on that, I think that when I was talking about Alibu earlier, I was trying not to mention this card because I think that this card is the like artifact creature tribal list that I've been wanting for a while. I like might even make it at some point, just because of what Nick said. It like actually lets me play the cool splashy artifacts, but feel good about it. I can play my Blade Griff prototype. And then I draw a card too. Like I can play Scarecrow, and then I also draw a card. Like I get back Metalwork Colossus, and I cast it, and I draw a card. Like this is cool. Like it's really cool to play these big, cool artifact creatures who don't die too good in combat now, because Lorehold is like, here, take this. I don't even know what is he holding there. Like,
oh yeah, no clue.
Here, take this metal object.
I'm gonna say that that's a servo that like Strixhaven or like the plane Arcavia is actually just Kaladesh in the far future.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's good one.
But I'll say one last thing on this commander, which is that like Shimmermer and Vidalcan Orrery seem excellent here. So Shimmermer grants your artifact spells flash. Vidalcan Orrery lets you cast any spell as though it had flash. So because like Lorehold says that this ability triggers only once per turn, but that could be your turn or it could be your opponent's turn or like, your other opponent's turn. So you can actually get that trigger multiple times per round of turns if you have like a flash granter that allows you to cast your artifacts on other players' turns.
That's a very good point.
Mm-hmm. So you got like your victory chimes, you got your unwinding clock. What's the 4 mana artifact that untaps all your artifacts?
It is unwinding clock.
You had it in one. It is unwinding clock. Yeah,
is a winding clock. Yeah,
Nailed
so
it.
like it. Nice. Good to know that part of my brain still works. Yeah, so I do think it's possible to like get value out of this every turn, and you get to play with all these artifacts that honestly don't really have like a dedicated home right now. Like you can put them places, but now it's like Loshiel's like, hey bud, no, come over here. I'll pour you a beer. Let's get in there.
I know. Yeah, I've been waiting for the deck where like Blade Griff prototype is actually good, actually what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he's here. I think Lorehold says, I'm here for you, bud.
Card neutral. Oh, yeah.
I love it. You love to see it.
All right, we got Dig Site Engineer for 2 and a white. We got a 3/3 creature Dwarf Artificer. So whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may pay 2. If you do, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. So I saw this card, and I really just am questioning to myself, like, if, like, let's just assume you're in mono white. Like, mono white is, because you're monocolor, you're reliant on a lot of artifacts, which is awesome. But my question is, like, how often do you actually want to pay the 2 to create, like, a token beater and do swingy attack things? Like, can anyone answer that question? Like, how much do you actually want that?
That's a great question.
As a mono white player, I, at least in my strategy, never. This wouldn't be relevant to my deck at least, but I do know that some other mono white decks, because I go very much with the stacks and the hate bears. This doesn't appeal to me so much, but I do know, as we've kind of talked about with like even Lil Shield, the elephant guy that we just talked about, this would be a little more relevant, but not in, I think, the general sense of mono white, unless if I'm mistaken.
I don't know. I feel like there are some places for it. The one thing I was really thinking about, because it's one of the commanders I've probably brewed with the most from Commander Legends and like have not built any versions of in real life, is Arden. So Arden is the uncommon partner, the core cleric. I can't remember what he is, but basically has the trigger where at the beginning of combat you can move any number of like auras and equipment onto
He's
a thing.
awesome.
Yeah, super good and like actually crazy powerful for an uncommon, like really insane. And something I found with my Arden lists is that they actually will have mana left over, because the things, unless you're doing like a funny build with certain auras, you like play your equipment and then you don't have to pay the equip costs, so you have a little bit of mana left over. So I was thinking like in Arden lists that are actually like equipment based, so like red white Arden or like Arden XY lists, you might actually want to pay to make like a good attacker that's going to get bigger as the game goes on, that can hold the equipment pretty good, because you can just go like play my sword, pay 2 extra to get a guy. He's probably like a 2/2 to a 4/4 depending on what turn it is if you ramped with stuff, and then you just equip it for free, and now you gotta, every equipment comes with an attacker basically.
Huh. Okay.
I think that's a really solid strategy. I also just think if you're in some sort of white deck that isn't Teshar, but which runs that isn't but which runs a lot of like mana rocks, maybe like a Rebec and something else partner list, or like a Sidri list, perhaps some sort of artifact based list with white in it that doesn't naturally have a lot of creatures. Maybe that's the place for Dig Site Engineer, because I could see these creatures getting like really big very quickly. I'm definitely like, not super high on vanilla creatures in general in Commander, but a whole bunch of vanilla creatures that are enormous being generated off of one card, I'm starting to get interested at that point. Oh, sorry. I have one more potential place where this could be good. In like a Depala list. So Depala is like very heavy on vehicles, and Dig Site Engineer is a dwarf, and it gives you creatures that will be able to then crew your vehicles.
Oh.
Agreed.
I'm feeling it.
All right. Are we okay to move on to Bronze Guardian?
I think so.
Yeah.
Or,
Is that me? Is it?
No, I think it's me.
I'm gonna ask that question a million times.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Now that we're onto the hard stuff,
we're on the hard stuff, and we're also a little faded, or some of us like me, a lot faded. So Bronze Guardian, 4 4 and a white, artifact creature golem, double strike, ward 2. So whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter it unless that player pays 2. Other artifacts you control have ward 2. Bronze Guardian's power is equal to the number of artifacts you control. Alright. So, what do we think?
I'm low on this card. What I'm really scared of in my like heavy artifact list is Bane of Progress, Vandal Blast, Austere Command, Cleansing Nova, all of these mass artifact removal spells. I don't care if my opponent wants to disenchant something of mine. I'm okay with a 1-for-1 trade, but it's like the 6-for-1 that will lose me the game. And so I don't think that like ward is the solution to the problem faced by the go wide artifact deck.
Yeah, I can see that. The ability to give other artifacts, I mean, it's kind of nice, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't know. Personally, I don't know where I would want to run this, maybe in less powerful Dishar decks. I think Ward's interesting. I don't think that this necessarily is like the inclusion Ward card, though, that, we'll see a lot of play.
Yeah. I mean, I think they had to start somewhere. The only place I could think that I am going to end up seeing this I'm not saying I would play this here myself, but the most popular version of Send Triplets is Artifacts. If you are to look at the types on EDH Rec. And I think this is where we're going to see that. Like having your Send Triplets blown up kind of blows if you are playing that list, and that happens pretty often because people don't want their spells stolen. So this makes sense there if you're doing like an artifact version of that list. Other than that, I really cannot think of anywhere to play this because it could possibly hit really hard, but it's at such a bad rate, and it's one of those cards where like I can see how it's worth 5 mana, but I don't care.
Yeah. I mean,
But yeah,
I think we're good to move on to the next card. I mean,
yeah.
in my mind, this is a little bit of a snoozer, but there's
and there'll be
a
some
home for it
snoozies.
somewhere.
The little snoozies in here sometimes, you can't all be zingers,
Zing.
Is it I'm
Actually,
reading this
I
one,
am
right?
reading this one, Zach.
Damn,
I know. Wait your turn. Fuck.
Shit.
All right. This next one is Triplicate Titan. It is 9 mana for a 9/9 artifact creature golem with flying, vigilance, and trample. And when Triplicate Titan dies, create a 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature token with flying, a 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature token with vigilance, and a 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature token with trample. How do you all feel about this card?
Big 9/9.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen this card before.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, because Guy, remember? Phyrexian Triniform? You love that card.
I did love that card, but then I recently took it out of my deck because I thought, oh, this isn't actually that good for the amount of mana, and the Encore ability wasn't that great. I do like how you don't have to spend mana necessarily to get, three golem creatures off of this, but it's not going in Perforos. It's not.
Well, which
mana
Perforos? Which Perforos you
Perforos
talking
1.0. If my listeners know anything, it's that I only care about Perforos 1.0. 2.0 is dead in my mind.
Oh no! Give him a chance.
Well, okay, I will definitely agree with you that this is not worth 9 mana, which is why I have zero intention of paying retail price for the Triplicate Titan. If I'm going to be using this card, it's going to be like in a Duretti list or a Feldon list or a Perforos 2.0, where I'm spending 0 to 3 mana to get my 9/9, and then when it dies, getting a bunch of golems.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is something one of my favorite cards is Trading Post, and I love cards like this because they loop with Trading Post. You can sack it to draw a card, and then you can sack one of the tokens to get it back. This is a little bit worse than other versions of things with Trading Post, but I would still Goblin Welder this to all hell and back. That sounds like a great time to me. Like Nick said, if I'm paying 9 mana for this, I'm probably losing to what my opponent's doing. If I'm not spending any mana for this, I might be winning the game at that point. And I think that brings us to this next one, right? The one I actually am supposed to read.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, hell yeah. Okay, so this is Wake the Past. This is a sorcery. It costs 5 red-white. It says, return all artifact cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. They gain haste until end of turn. That is simple, good, nice. This is a good boy right there.
Yeah, I like it. It's a one-sided mass recursion spell of all of your artifacts, which there aren't actually that many effects in the game that do that aren't one-sided and recur every single artifact you have. So I'm actually, I understand it's 7 mana, which is a lot of mana to ask for, but the effect is pretty decent, and like I can see like the right list reanimating a bunch of stuff, and again it has haste, so maybe you either tap for mana or you tap for attacking and you kill me. So I think it seems decent.
I do think it's a little odd in this deck specifically, though, just because sometimes you want those artifacts to be in the graveyard to exile them, to then create token copies of those. So,
with like Oscar.
yeah. So in that sense, I can see Wake the Past being a powerhouse in some maybe other decks. I don't know if necessarily the Oscar deck is the one, unless if you are just planning to like use his 1 mana ability to sacrifice an artifact, fill up your graveyard with a bunch of artifacts, and then recur them the next turn. But it's like, I mean, it could be a blowout if you do have your graveyard full of just artifacts or artifact creatures.
Yeah, I think the one thing I want to say is like to kind of push back on the point you just made. Like, if it's late game, like one of the things that's been a problem for white, and this is Lorehold, this is Boros, but is just closing out the game without anyone knowing. This can do that. Like if you're sitting on like, let's say, a triplicate Titan and a Bronze Guardian in your graveyard, and someone is tapped out because they're like, ha ha ha, you're playing Boros Attacky and there's nothing on your battlefield. All of a sudden you like Wake the Past and like get back maybe 3 to 7 things because it's late game and they're dead, like. So I think the potential is there, and the fact that we have Lorehold artifact creature tribal is kind of cool now. Like I think maybe that was just something that didn't exist before.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Zach. Like being able to surprise your opponents is something that is for sure missing from white, and so giving that ability to these decks seems very powerful.
Yep, and with that, I've done my part. I played my role.
All right, you're dismissed.
I read my card. Goodbye, everyone.
One
no, I'm
down.
kidding. I'll be back in 4 cards.
Let's move on to the spiciest card. If I might be presumptuous there to already say that, but yeah, this next card, Blake, why don't you read it?
Yeah, I think you're justified in that. This next card is called Monologue Tax. It is 2 and a white for an enchantment. Love me my enchantments. Whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, you create a treasure token. Discuss. Go.
Who wants to go first? Because I feel like this card could probably warrant its own episode.
I mean, can go first.
It did
I can go first.
If you're Pleasant Kenobi, it did warrant its own episode.
True.
I just watched that before we did this. I was like, sipping on my wine, and I was like, oh, you have a little episode about this card? Let me listen. And I was like, okay, you're wrong, but okay.
All right. Okay.
That's spicy.
My thought on it is that it's going, like, I think it's going to be better in the late game than it will be in the early game. And that's typically not what you want of your acceleration. You want your acceleration to like jump you from turn 3 to turn to like 6 mana or whatever. You don't, because like if you cast this on turn 3, your opponents are probably going to be like 3-drop, 3-drop, 3-drop. They're just not going to have enough mana to do enough things to trigger this early in the game. Late in the game, sure, if you top deck this will probably get a treasure for each opponent because they have a lot more mana. They've got their card draw engines going. They're just able to do more things. But what you really want out of your acceleration is the ability to launch you ahead of your opponents. So on turn 3, I would wish that my monologue tax was a Coalition Relic or a Worn Power Stone, like 100% of the time.
Okay, I mean that's interesting because I would still play this on turn 3 regardless, because then it almost acts kind of like a rule of law where you're limiting your opponents to how much they play in the same kind of way. It is a little more nerf.
But if they're like planning to play a 3-drop, then it's not really like limiting them. It's just like, okay, I don't get punished for the thing I was going to do anyway.
Okay, yes, that is a good point. So yes, maybe it is better in the middle game. I guess I like this a lot. I mean, I like this a lot. It is more nerfed in the sense of like smothering tax. It's not as overbearing, but I don't know. I'm happy to see white get something, at least in mono white, at least.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so this card, like, to me, when I saw it, like, what I thought about was like, do you know that like meme? It's like the guy, it's like Jake, and then right next to it in the yearbook picture, it's like Cool Jake, and it's just him with sunglasses on.
Yeah.
I can't. I'm getting the name wrong, but
Like
what I'm
Daniel
talking
and
about.
Cool
That's
Daniel.
what this was. Yeah, Daniel and Cool Daniel. So there's Daniel, and then there's Cool Daniel has the sunglasses on. This is cool Manolith to me. This is like Manolith with some extra steps and some extra handholds where like treasure is not nothing. There's a lot of things that can interact with artifacts dying or tokens or mana or like whatever, like having an enchantment. Like there's a lot of just like places that this exists in, and I would be surprised if this wasn't just a manolith in most games, but it could be more than that, so I think it's fine. That's where I'm at with it.
Okay, and I have one last thing to add about this card, which is I kind of tried to keep attention to like all of the player base, so I've listened to like CEDH players talk about this card, and one interesting thing that they have commented on is the fact that this card is a non-bow with rule of law effects, which at that end of this power level spectrum, quote unquote, you really want to be playing rule of law, and this is a non-bow with it. So there's a real tension to not play this card. So because of that reason, I think this card specifically, it kind of falls in my mind in like this middle point where it doesn't want to be CEDH viable, but it's not necessarily like super casual either. Do you guys agree?
That's kind of interesting because Crom is often thought about as one of the better partner commanders, and this is I mean, what does he do? He draws a card off of the second
treasure
spell. Yeah, so that's a little interesting in my mind, where you're benefiting off of your opponent's casting a second spell per turn. Yeah, that's weird. That's weird.
I don't know. I'll play it. I'll test it out. I'll let you guys know.
Well, we've got a lot of other decks to get through. I'm ready to move on to the next card. How about you guys?
Yeah,
for sure. All right, we got Oh gosh, this is a big word. Archamancer's Map 2 white artifact. When Archamancer's Map enters the battlefield, search your library for up to 2 basic plains cards, reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, if that player controls more lands than you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So we've gone from one mono white banger to another mono white banger. What do we think?
This seems awesome. I'm very down for this card. Just sort of thinking about how it'll play out, unless you're 75% of the time you're not going to be going first. And so like if you are going, even second, you cast this on turn 3, you pass, your opponent to your right who did go first, they're going to play their 4th land, and when that happens, you get to drop in one of your planes. So basically it's the white cultivate is sort of how I'm seeing it. That's kind of going to be the base mode on this thing. And if your opponents are, and that's just with like typical turn order, if your opponents are like actually ramping, then this is likely to get both of those lands onto the battlefield probably before you untap, and it's just like the white Sky Shroud claim, except it costs 3 mana. Like this seems like a very good card.
Yeah, I mean, I second that. I can see myself slotting this into my mono white deck at least. And I do also like the fact that it combos pretty well with Osgear, because like the tough part too is like if you don't have any more lands that you're drawing into. You could sacrifice this with Osgear and then, make 2 copies of this to get then more planes to put to your hand to just allow you to trigger the ability where you can then it's like pseudo burgeoning almost.
One thing I'd like to say about this card is I know that a common criticism of a lot of these new white cards is like, oh, is mono white ever only going to be the catch-up color, It's like, oh, your opponent has more resources? Well, here's a card to try and catch up with them a little bit. And to that I say, just try imagining yourself as a card designer and consider the fact that for Eternal formats, you don't want to create something too busted and then have it be in the format forever. And I'm a very patient person, so I don't really mind this card or that sort of downside, quote unquote, of oh, it's a catch-up color. Yeah, they have all the time in the world to play, I don't know, arguably more powerful spells in the future. So I know there's some people that give that critique, but I don't really mind it.
I'm just happy to see it. That's all I'm really going to say about it.
I mean, fair enough.
Fair enough.
All right, I think this next card is to me. This is Cursed Mirror. It is 2 and a red for an artifact. It taps to add red, and as it enters the battlefield, you may have it become a copy of any creature on the battlefield until end of turn, except it has haste. How do you all feel about this card?
So at the very base level, at worst case scenario, it's a 3 mana value, mana rock with upside, which is pretty decent. And it's nice that it's making this clone copy for the turn because it feels very red. It feels very temporary. I'm in favor of this.
Yeah, I'm in favor of it too, specifically for the Osgear deck, just because kind of similar to Archomancer's map. You could sacrifice this in the later game to then, create 2 copies of this to kind of copy creatures, the most important creatures on the battlefield to gain some value as well. And then they stick around as mana rocks. So it's still kind of, in my mind, is, good way for Boros to ramp, but it's a little specific tech. I don't see it being played much else outside of this pre-con, though, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, the bonus is really sweet. Having it come in as something and attack. I can think of a bunch of red decks that are going to have awesome creatures that you're going to want to attack with. But the fact that every turn beyond that, it's just a manolith makes me kind of low on this card. It's cool for a single turn to have it, you make a token copy of Inferno Titan with your Feldon and then drop this and wow, another Inferno Titan attacking and boom. But, for 99% or 95% of the game, it's not going to be that. It's just going to be a manolith. So I agree. I don't think I'm going to be putting this into a lot of non-precon decks.
Mm-hmm.
I think this next card isn't all the decks, but we're going to talk about it here, right?
Yes.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice. So this is Study Hall. This is a land. It's the common land. They always print a random common land in the commander decks. And this year's is this one, Study Hall. It taps for a colorless, and it has 1 tap, add 1 mana of any color. When you spend this mana to cast your commander, scry X, where X is the number of times it's been cast from the command zone this game. I want to say that I run Opal Palace, and I don't know if I'll run this card, because scry's not as... I don't know. I'm just not... I feel this a lot less. I don't want to scry that often, but if I'm casting my commander for the 4th time, I might kill someone with it.
I'll say that if I really, really want to scry and I want mana fixing, I would just run Path of Ancestry. I'm okay with giving away 1 turn's worth of mana in order to not have to keep spending mana to activate my Study Hall to get my scry. And also, I would like to be able to get my mana fixing every single turn instead of only the turns I'm willing to pump additional mana into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's almost kind of like, they were at the design table and they were like, quick, we need something to kind of go along with the pun of study hall, and they came up with this card. Again, it's a card that, similar to Curse Mirror, I don't think we will see outside of the precons that much.
I've already forgotten about it. All right. This next card, however, it's a little bit better, I'd argue. It is Angel of the Ruins. It is 5 white for a 5/7 artifact creature angel. With flying, obviously. So, when it enters the battlefield, exile up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantments. And it also has Plains cycling for 2. So you can pay 2, discard it, search up a Plains, add it to your hand. I kind of like this simply because, like, if you can get multiple triggers, then I think it's pretty good removal. Otherwise, I think we've kind of echoed on previous, like the set review. Like, I usually like my artifact and enchantment removal at instant speed, but like I said, if you can get multiple triggers, this might actually be worth it.
I think that, like, I would not be interested in paying retail price on this card, but it's great that it gets itself in the graveyard. So if you're running a commander that can reanimate it, that's pretty appealing. Or if you're running a commander that can cheat it into play, like Kalia of the Vast or Mael the Anima, that makes it That makes it look a lot better. I definitely would not be paying 7 mana for this effect, though.
I mean, you plain cycle this away, and then you can play Wake the Past, return it to the battlefield, and then, there's some synergy there going. I'd see what the designers are doing.
Oh, yeah.
I give you a clap.
But otherwise, I don't feel like I would see this card also much outside of the precon, unless maybe in a Gavi deck, though. Because, like, you could cycle this away for free on a turn to just get you a Plains. I do like the kind of like basic land cycling, though. I think that's an interesting kind of ability, and I wish we would see that more on some cards.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing we're going to see just in supplemental sets like this, because like they had it in Alara simply because they needed like a smoothing mechanic for the 5 color decks they were trying to push in limited.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fine, it's cool. I'm glad this card has it because I think it is cool for a mono white card to have. And I want to just mention Yannette. Yannette is cares about odd cards, and this is definitely an odd card. And if I were to attack with Yannette and get this card for free, I'd be probably pretty happy. It's a 3 for 0. So that's cool. Or 2 for 0, 3 for 0 if they kill it. So that's pretty much it. This is a pretty cool reanimate target. If I'm going to Goblin Welder something, this is probably pretty high on that list of things that would be good to do.
Yeah, but we all agree we don't want to hard cast this. We want to like cheat it into play or like reduce it or reanimate it or something. We never actually want to pay 7 mana sorcery speed.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All right. That brings us to Ruin Grinder, which is 5 in a red artifact creature construct with Minache. When Ruin Grinder dies, each player may discard their hand and draw 7 cards. And hey, look at this! It has Mountain Cycling for 2 as well. So you can discard this card, search your library for a mountain card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle. How do we feel? Like, it's a kind of a wheel.
This is like the 4th time I'm going to mention Feldon in this episode. But this seems great in like Feldon of the Third Path or Duretti, or possibly in like chain, like the Rakdos Chainer, red black Chainer. Again, like the Angel we just spoke about. I don't want to pay retail for this, but if I can cheat it into play, and especially if I can cheat it in a way that will make its death trigger occur, like with Feldon or like with Perforos Bronze Blooded, that is pretty attractive to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I didn't actually make a note about this, but it is costed as if it was for limited, which is not something I want to see in a commander like supplemental product. So that's a little upsetting.
Yeah, I think this card just has one too many limitations on it for me personally, because, like, as you were saying, like, you kind of want to cheat into play since it is 6 mana, and then you want to, like, sacrifice it to something, whether that's like a Phyrexian Altar or Krark Clan Ironworks or Goblin Engineer or whatever it may be. And then, even then, if you're able to do that, the wheel is still optional. And one of the powerful things about wheels is, like, it disrupts your opponent's hand. So I feel like this just has one too many hoops to jump through that I'm just like, I actually don't want to play this.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because I actually like this card. Like, I love wheeling. I like getting more versions of wheel, and this card's no exception. Like Nick said, playing it in like a Feldon or Duretti or something like that, like, is pretty rad. But I really don't see many homes for it.
All right, wonderful. I get to read my favorite card in the set.
Oh yeah.
This next card is Audacious Reshapers. It is 2 and a red for a 3/3 human artificer. It has tap, sacrifice an artifact, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal an artifact card. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Audacious Reshapers deals damage to you equal to the number of cards revealed this way. What are your thoughts on this?
So I think we can all agree that this is basically a polymorph effect for artifacts. Yeah, like you get rid of an artifact and you reveal until you find another artifact. And
yeah.
I mean, I very rarely see the polymorph effect. I know that they've been printing more of them. Maybe I should start playing more of them. I don't know.
I think there are a lot of lists that can generate crappy artifacts that you don't care about losing and then flip into good ones. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking like Perforos Bronze Blooded. Like, once you drop in your Blightsteel Colossus or whatever, or your Phyrexian Triniform, then that card is already doomed. So you can just toss it to the Audacious Reshapers and they'll flip it into whatever other Haymaker artifact you are running in your deck. Like, that deck strikes me as one that has a lot of artifacts that are going to be dying as a natural course of things, and also a lot of things you would really like to flip into. Another thing is like Toggo, Goblin Weaponsmith, or like maybe Magda. Both of them create artifact tokens that aren't particularly good, so you can happily just like toss them to your Audacious Reshapers and get something good in exchange.
I know that you might not be familiar with this, but here on this podcast, we would never, sacrifice our Blightsteel Colossus, the mascot of this podcast. That's blasphemy here. We would never.
Mm-hmm.
We love him too much, but, to anyone else, maybe.
But not the Blightsteel.
But never the Blightsteel.
He's too big and chunky.
Too big, so chunky.
He's very chunky. He's a stinky boy, though. You gotta watch out for him. And I think it's my... Wait, am I right in that it's my turn to read this next one?
I think so.
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, I can't believe it. I was right. So this is Battle Mage's Bracers. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red for an equipment. It has equipped creature has haste. And it also has, whenever an ability of equipped creature is activated, if it isn't a mana ability, you may pay 1 generic. If you do copy that ability, you may choose new targets for the copy. The equip cost is 2. So, I mean, I'm just going to say that, like, it kind of hurt. Like, Illusionist Bracers is really cool because it just does the thing. This is another copy of Illusionist Bracers, but the mana, like, the 1 mana, that hurts.
The mana gate.
Yeah. If you want to call it that.
Well, I think that is a term. I think that is a term within R&D where it's like they put mana in front of a ability to like kind of nerf it.
Oh, it's not like we were stealing like plans from the DNC headquarters. Okay, nice.
I don't know if Illusionist Bracers really needed the nerf though. Like,
Yeah,
just
I
looking
can't-
at it. Well, looking at it on EDH Rec, it sees play in like 9,800 decks, so like a respectable number, but it's not blowing the doors off. I don't think you really needed to take it down a level.
Yeah, it's not like ubiquitous crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like back in 2015 I heard about Illusionist Bracers, and then I'm like, oh right, there's all these other cards I could play instead. Okay.
Yeah, I am a combo player. I've had to like temper my combos over the recent years to have friends still, but I even then have cut Illusionist Bracers from lists because it's so much mana up front to start doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Sometimes this just seems like I'm never going to play it.
I looked up Illusionist Bracers, and I think if you have the mana for it, in terms of like with this new card, Battle Mage's Bracers, it could combo off with Kiki Jiki and Zealous Conscripts if you have the infinite mana, where you would tap Kiki Jiki with, this on it, and then, have Zealous Conscripts, you create a bunch of tokens, you gain control of all your opponent's creatures while untapping Kiki Jiki.
I'm going to be honest, Guy. You don't need to add a third card.
They
when
already
you've got
combo.
the Kiki Zealous Conscripts combo.
Oh, well, okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, you already got infinite 3/3s. What more can you ask for? What's better than this?
I guess like just taking all my opponent's stuff, but that's overkill at that point.
That's
so,
overkill.
You're right.
They already did. You don't need to loot the corpse.
Whatever floats your boat, though. I'm not gonna king shame.
It's really like just how much shame do you want to put on your opponents? Like, I'm gonna take your stuff and beat you to death.
I mean, I guess you're right.
Just flex
With
on them.
that, though, yeah, dunk on them. But let's move on to. Wait, is it my turn?
I think it's
Yeah,
Blake's
it's my turn.
This is, and this is a mechanic I don't think we talked about, right? Or we talked about it briefly. This is the first card we've seen with it.
Mm-hmm. All right, Blake, go.
Yeah, so we have Excavation Technique. It is 3 and a white for a sorcery with Demonstrate. So again, when you cast a spell, you may copy it. If you do, choose an opponent to also copy it. Players may choose new targets for their copies. So just remember that going forward. Destroy target non-land permanent. Its controller creates 2 treasure tokens. I don't know. I feel like this... I don't want to beat a dead horse, so I'm just going to say it here at the beginning. I feel like Demonstrate is a mechanic specifically for group hug decks. Talk more about it.
So I don't necessarily... I think the ability to be like, hey, I'm going to blow up these things. Can you blow up that? Is fine. Like, it's fine political leverage. I think the ability to just hit your stuff anyway is bad. But that being said, like 4 mana to do this is pretty bad. 4 mana to blow up 2 things and give 2 treasure to an opponent, and then an opponent does that.
Well, to give 4 treasures to your opponents.
Yeah, it just, the more you like compound it, like you're like, okay, well, 1 time I'm not super into, but what about 2 times? And then you're like, I'm not super into that either. And then you're like, oh, and then someone else does this possibly to me, and you're like, oh, okay. So I'm not a fan of this There are Demonstrate cards I'm going to talk about that I'm like feeling pretty good about.
Yeah.
This is not one of them.
So if you happen to listen to the Commander Theory set review of Strixhaven, you may have noticed us repeatedly say like, oh, this sorcery speed removal would be so good if it happened to be an instant. I would play it in a heartbeat if it was instant speed. And honestly, I didn't do my due diligence in like explaining why that is. But of course, for all of you Wizard staff listeners, I'm giving you the excellent analysis and content that I did not provide on our own podcast, which is that
negligent.
very, very. But really, like, in a game of Commander, you are only playing like 25% of the time. Your sorceries are basically half as good because 75% of the playtime is going to be your opponent's turns. And also, if you've sort of like been listening to the thread running through the Commander Theory commentary on all the Strixhaven cards, we constantly talked about the combo potential of all these new cards. And the thing about instant speed removal is you get to disrupt combos, you get to prevent them from killing you, and sorcery speed removal is unable to do that. So, I really am not a big fan of excavation technique, regardless of like sort of what mode you're using, because it's not highly efficient for the cost, and also it just is not going to be able to be played on most of your opponent's turn. It's not going to be able to disrupt combos. I'm not high on this card.
I don't remember if it was earlier this episode or late last episode, but I think you hit the head on the nail on this one, or however the phrase goes.
Piece of shit.
I kind of forget, but I agree. And white's typically the premier color for like target removal, and I think that this is just so bad in comparison to all those other cards that white already has, and giving your opponents treasure tokens is not something that I want to do ever. So even with this demonstrate ability, even I've seen people say like, oh yeah, I'll just blow up some of my own stuff. Like, why would you do that? Like, why?
Yep. Hey, just wait till we see the Silverquill deck. Spoiler
Oh, I know.
alert.
I cannot wait to get to the Silverquill.
Yeah, I just echo everything that you all have said already. Like, it's like they're really putting a lot of emphasis on the politics of some of these cards. And you know what? You don't need to do that. There's already a lot of politicking. There's like, no one's winning, but you have this and you have this. Table, who should I attack? That's already in the game. That's just built. We could all play with like 40 grizzly bears, like 20 forests, and a bunch of giant growths, and all of us could look at each other and be like, well, who should I attack this turn? And that would still be like a question, like an interesting political question, right? Like, I don't think you need to make bad cards like excavation technique to encourage people to make deals.
Oh, yeah. We'll get there.
Yeah, I never play political cards, but I make deals all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's just I'm gonna shake this off and move on to the deck one of the decks I'm really excited about.
All right, so we just finished excavation technique.
Yeah, and Zach, you mentioned you were really excited about this next deck, so why don't you introduce it?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the Silverquill list next. So Silverquill, I'm going to read their little blurb. Take that with however you want. Silverquills wield the magic of words, from inspiring battle poetry to biting arcane insults, stylish, intimidating, and tirelessly competitive. These mages are born leaders with rager's sharp wit and natural charisma that can be used for good or for ill. Their motto is sharp style, sharper wit. I don't know if you're going to be able to tell any of that from this commander deck. Yeah, so I guess, do we want to just get into the face commander and keep on moving?
Yes. Who read the last card?
Oh God, that's such a good question. It was Blake read the last card, so it's Guy reads this one.
Okay, so we got Brina, the Demagogue, 1 white black legendary creature, whatever. Bird Warlock, flying. Whenever a player attacks one of your opponents, if that opponent has more life than another of your opponents, that attacking player draws a card, and you put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature you control. And, unfortunately, this doesn't have the best PT. It's a 1/3. Ooh, okay. what do we think? Because this is the face commander, and from the looks of it, I am not optimistic about what the rest of the cards are going to be like.
I think that's a pretty correct assumption to make.
No spoilers, but
It kind of sucks to give your opponents free cards while you are the one who is like pumping your creatures with +1/+1 counters on your creatures. Like, arguably, it's kind of nice because it's something Orzhov Black-White has never done. But again, it's like, unless you're playing like maybe Group Hug, like I don't know if you really want to play this.
Yeah, it's definitely new design space for Orzhov. I think like aggressively pursuing the loss is something that Orzhov hasn't really experimented with prior to now. You know, they typically Orzhov decks just like maybe slide behind the green or blue as like a natural course of the game, but they haven't really like tried to lose as hard as Brina does. So that's new for sure.
Oh God, savage.
I'm sorry. I'm so the fact that like this is in the same color identity as Timna the Weaver is you just get like a sense of vertigo, like looking like like looking down on Brina from what you're used to, and it's not even and like they're both pre-con commanders. Like there's
Was Timna pre-con?
I don't. Timna was in the Commander 2016 pre-cons. Yeah, she
My
was one of the partners, and yeah.
Fuck.
So like going from like drawing up to 3 cards per turn to giving away 3 cards per round of turns is quite a reversal of fortune for the black-white color identity. I'll say that much. But what is everyone else's opinion on Brina the Demigod?
I do like how it is very much different in terms of like what Orzhov is about. But looking at this in comparison to even the Silverquill Dragon that we got, I would never run this as the face commander. I think, oh gosh, I hope the other Silverquill commander is better than this at least. And I'm already kind of sweating because I know it's not much better.
I'll push back when we get, especially it's the next card we're going to talk about. I do like the next commander that we're going to talk about, the other Silverquill commander, but this one is I don't even know if I can like voice my disdain for this card well enough.
Let me ask you, Zach, which commander would you have chosen to be the face of the deck? The first thing that people see when they look at the Silverquill statement pre-constructed deck.
Yeah, that is a good point. So that is something that I maybe we would talk about at the end. I'm just going to bring it up now because I have been drinking. It seems like they have picked the less powerful card as the face card for each of these commander decks, and I think Brina is the perfect example of that because I don't know if I would have picked. I don't know if I'd have picked Brina to be the face.
Are you talking about a similar situation where like Savine was the face of the Commander Pre-Con, but like what was it? Elsha of the Infinite was like the much more popular version.
Oh yeah, the busted one.
Yeah. I think that was just because they were like picking things that they thought would be popular. Because if you look at like the other ones, like Angie Falkenroth was the face card, and the other one, Kadena, was the face card. Like they did pick strong commanders to be the face cards of the 2019 commander list, but this time it seems like they went the opposite route. They picked the less strong commander to be the face card, and I think that was to like push the casual aspect. But man, I mean, I feel like casual is like too good of a term for Brina. Like it's just not like I can't imagine a world in which I would want to build this list.
Do you want to talk about the next commander so that the audience has a bit more perspective?
Before we move on, we may revisit this later, but Zach, do you happen to Do you happen to know who the designer of the Silverquill deck was, just off the top of
Oh
your head?
god.
Oh yeah, this is a this is a I think actually relevant information. So
Mhm.
each deck was primarily designed by one person. The Silverquill list was designed by Sheldon Menery, who is the known as the progenitor of the Commander format. He worked at Wizards for a brief stint, I think less than a year, but one of the things that he did was make this Commander list, and I I just think it speaks volumes as to the play style that he likes to play with, and I'm gonna leave it
Yeah,
there
I'd
for
agree.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was
Yeah.
there for 6 months, if I'm not correct. I'd have to like double check myself on that.
Yeah,
So
I
I'll
know
be
it wasn't
interested
a
to.
whole year.
Yeah, it wasn't a whole year, but I'll be interested to see if there are any other I think he worked on another Commander product that I'll be interested to see what his influence was there. But yeah, this is interesting to see kind of what he had in mind or envisioned for our format.
Yeah, I'll say some stuff at the end of the list as we talk about all these cards. But this next commander, is it my turn to read, or should I just read this
I
one?
think it's your turn. No, wait, no, it's Nick's turn. It's Nick's turn.
Actually, Zach, if you're excited about this, I will give this up to you because I would love to read the next one.
Oh, cool. So this is Felisa, Fang of Silverquill. So this is a 3/2 vampire wizard for 2 white-black. They have flying, and they have Mentor. Mentor is an ability from Return to Ravnica. Or, God, what was it called? It was, what
Ravnica
was third
Allegiance?
Ravnica set called?
No,
Yes,
oh,
thank
no,
you.
sorry.
Ravnica
Was it
Allegiance.
Guilds of Ravnica? No, it was Ravnica Allegiance.
Guilds of
No, it was
Ravnica.
Ravnica
It was
Allegiance
Guild.
and then Guilds of Ravnica, I think.
Okay,
They
yeah.
always
It
follow
was
that
Ravnica.
RG thing.
Oh, you're right. I didn't realize that. So it was Guilds of Ravnica Allegiance. In the third iteration of Boros, basically, when this creature attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature with less power. So, I mean, it's kind of cool that this like school person has Mentor. The last ability this card has is whenever a non-token creature you control dies, if it had a counter on it, create X tapped 2/1 white and black inkling creature tokens with flying, where X is the number of counters it had on it. This is infinitely more interesting to me than the commander we just talked about.
Yeah, I think this is pretty sweet. The fact that it counts any type of counter is really interesting. There's a lot you can play around with that. For example, like Tetsimok, one of the elder dinosaurs from Rivals of Ixalan, allows you to pay a single black mana to put a prey counter on a creature you control. So you can just spend a bunch of black mana, prey on the same creature a bunch of times, and then sacrifice it and get that many inklings. So that's a pretty efficient way to generate these 2/1 flyers, which are like, respectable bodies.
Yeah, I think that's actually probably one of the best things about Silverquill is that inklings are actually a good like size of token. Like this reward is actually a reward, like a thing dying with 2 counters on it gives you 2/1 flyers. Like that's actually something. That's cool.
Yeah, there's also a lot of creatures that are 0/0s that enter the battlefield with a bunch of counters on them. So they also work really well with Felisa, just converting directly into tons and tons of inklings. I think it's going to be really easy to make a scary flying force of dudes in this deck.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I think I could see this in a Teysa Karlov deck too, because it could double up your counters, and you also have the ability with cards of like Anointed Procession or that I forget what it's called, but it's like it's the white enchantment that also makes like your tokens 4/4 angels.
Divine something.
Yeah, it's like
Divine
divine.
Intervention. No,
No. That's my favorite Magic card. You're thinking
Yeah.
of something else.
It's divine visitation.
Yes,
yeah.
that's the one.
Yeah, so I feel like if you have that setup going, you're pretty well off.
I don't even know if you need to bother with that. Like honestly, 2/1 flyers are like the base case is good enough that I don't know if you need to spend a card and 5 mana to make them 4/4s. Is that insane? Is that crazy? I don't know. I feel like something like a Dictate of Heliod or a Cathar's Crusade would probably have more, like the same or more impact for the same amount of mana. Because like a Dictate of Heliod, you don't need to get it down before you start doing the token creation.
Yeah.
Okay.
2/1 flyers are actually pretty good token generation in this format, I'd say.
So we're saying that this is the better Silverquill commander out of the box, you think?
I would heartily agree to that.
Sorry, hardly agree or hard agree?
Oh, sorry.
That is super hard agree.
Oh, okay.
Heartily, as in like it's coming from my heart. That's
Oh,
Okay. I kind of
heartily
blinked for
like
a
your heart
second, and I was
no,
like,
no, it's totally okay. All right, well, I would gladly agree to that. I think that this is much better than Brina.
oh, yeah. Okay, we're all in agreement.
Yes.
but yeah, I think honestly. So Nick, do you want to?
Yeah.
Oh,
I can't
Yes.
even like take this seriously.
Just give Nick everything.
Good.
Yeah, here you go. Do you want to get into this?
Yeah, all right. I've been all right. This is Nils Discipline Enforcer, 2 and a white for a 2/2 legendary creature human cleric. At the beginning of your end step, for each player, put a +1/+1 counter on up to one target creature that player controls. Each creature with one or more counters on it can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless its controller pays X, where X is the number of counters on that creature. How does everyone feel about Nils? Would you say he's in your top 5 commanders out of the pre-cons, or where would you place him? Where would you rank him out of the new commanders we're seeing in Commander 2021?
he's probably my bottom one, to be honest. But Nick, I feel like you have some pretty passionate thoughts, so I would gladly pass the mic already back to you.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I will say that I'm generally not a huge fan of ghostly prison effects. And one that is like in creature form just means it's much more vulnerable than, say, an enchantment. These kinds of cards, like, they basically tend to protect you up until your opponents have like set up their Alpha Strike, and then they just suddenly disappear. They die to a Doomblade. They get hit by a Swords to Plowshares. Like, and once Nils is gone, once he's back in your command zone, he's not going to be able to protect you from the triumph of the hordes or from the rampage of the Craterhoof Behemoth. Like, Nils will protect you until he doesn't, and that's the turn where you die. I also like don't love that he encourages you to increase the size of your opponent's creatures. I think that is probably not going to work out for you. It's just going to be more damage that eventually hits your face. And I really have to ask, like, what is, if I see a legendary creature in these precons, I assume that that it will be able to stand on its own as a commander. But I don't get what. I don't get what the Nils deck is supposed to do. How is it supposed to win? It's a mono white deck, so it's going to be falling behind in like ramp. It's going to be falling behind in card advantage, and all it can really do is delay the turn on which it dies.
Oof.
I don't see like really a path forward for Nils. But please tell me your thoughts on Nils Discipline Enforcer and why you think it was introduced into the commander card pool.
Well, I'm here to take some bets right now. In 1 year's time, how many decks do you think we will see on EDH track for Nils? Because I'm going to guess 18.
Oh, that's I was gonna guess.
Can I guess 20?
I was gonna say like. Yeah, I was gonna guess just because it's in a commander deck that it's probably gonna have more lists than Baird, Steward of Argive.
Yeah.
But not a lot more. So I was gonna do like maybe 50, 42.
That's
I'm gonna
very
say 42.
generous, but you've staked your claim.
I've seen the prices right before, so I know that the correct strategy in this situation is to guess 43 decks.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also like I'm also not very confident that Nils is going to see I'm not confident that he's going to resonate with the Commander community. I'll put it that way.
Are you saying that
Yeah.
every single commander, no matter how bad they are, at least gets 43 decks on edhrec.com?
If they're new enough, yes, I actually will say if you are a new enough commander, you get a minimum of 30 decks made.
I will say that, like, a lot of people they enter Commander through the precons. It's a pre-built deck, and
That is
true. If you're like joining Commander and you don't really understand what is actually good or valuable in the format, you may get tricked into building Nils Discipline Enforcer, and perhaps like there will be enough of those folks to make a dent on EDH Rec.
All right. I mean, I guess we'll meet up in a year's time and kind of reflect and say, all right, guy was right. 18 decks, and that's it.
If it is 18 decks, I'm gonna have to find some way to like congratulate
Take
you.
4 shots.
Just something.
Yes.
Make it. Yeah. How much box wine do you want, guy?
As much as I could really take, and I mean, I'm 2 bottle. I'm a full bottle in at this point, so like
Nice.
All right. So I can read this next card.
Yes, go right ahead,
Oh,
Blake.
please do.
I'm actually kind of excited about this next one, at least the talking about it.
Why?
Which is
Oh.
okay. Shush. It is Thane the Broker. For 2 and a black, you get a 3/3 legendary creature, human warlock, and then it has a bunch of activated abilities. Tap, sacrifice a creature, put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. Tap, remove a counter from a creature you control, create a treasure token. Tap, sacrifice an artifact, create a 2/1 white and black inkling creature token with flying, and then it has 3 and a black. Untap this card. So, in my mind, it seems very similar to Trading Post, where it has a bunch of these tap abilities converting one resource to another, and then at the end of it, it kind of has this non-tap ability where it can untap itself. However, it's not nearly as breakable and not nearly as much of a combo piece. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't talk about my baby like that.
Sweet lad.
My sweet, sweet, sweet little Trading Post. This has so many words, and it actually does so little.
Mhm.
Like that was just the only thing I really want to say about this. I'll let everyone else talk, but like I remember going through this and being like, oh wow, okay, it's got 4 activated abilities.
It must do something.
It must do something. And then I like went through, I like did the math in my head. I'm like, I have a counter on a creature.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
But I was like,
I'll spend my 12 mana to net 1 counter.
The
yeah,
value.
I was really blown away.
Yeah, I think that in order to play this commander, you have to solve for untapping. Like that is step number 1, because once you handle that part of the card, you can break it wide open. It's just like a really efficient resource conversion engine. But the fact that there's this step of paying 4 mana in between, like that is not how you're going to win any games of Magic the Gathering. I think that, so like Thornbite Staff is the easiest way to do that. It'll allow you to untap him whenever a creature dies, and there's a lot of ways to make that happen. I think like the easiest to assemble combo involves Thornbite Staff, any free sacrifice outlet, and any creature with like persist or undying. And the way that works is you're going to sacrifice that persist or undying creature to your sacrifice outlet. It'll come back with a counter on it. You will remove that counter from the creature, that -1/-1 counter or that +1/+1 counter, and generate a treasure token. then you will sacrifice that creature again to your sacrifice outlet, and Thornbite Staff will untap your Fane. So you're basically back where you started, except you've netted a treasure token. Once you have infinite treasures, you get infinite untaps on Fane, and you can go through that loop of activated abilities enough times to do whatever you want. So that's cool, but the Thornbite Staff is literally the only card that makes that work. So your deck has to be dedicated to finding the Thornbite Staff, because I think this commander is just not going to get there without solving for the untap.
Yeah. To me, this only just occurred to me, but we also just had the mono black commander Turgrid, where if you cast the backside of her, you have the lantern, and if you have an infinite mana, that's kind of just a way to easily win the game. That seems a lot easier than casting this guy, to be honest.
Oof.
So
Wait, are you telling me that there's another commander that's better than Fane?
I hate to break it to you, Zach. I know that you were so passionate to build this commander, but yeah, I unfortunately there is someone better.
But you can pay 4 to untap him.
I think the mana rate, don't quote me until I double check, is still better on Turgrid though. Turgrid is
Damn it.
yeah. Oh no, Turgrid is the same mana rate. So glad no one
Shit.
quoted me on that.
Well, the thing is, it's an instant win with the lantern, though. Like, if you have infinite mana, someone actually dies, as opposed to Fane. It's like, well, I hope I have a creature that can attack this turn and that it has evasion or something. Or actually, I hope I have 3 of them so I can hit all of my opponents. See, and it's or the lantern is just pay infinite taxes or you're dead, and most people are unable to do that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of cute where you can remove any kind of counter to create the treasure token, so it doesn't have to be those +1/+1 counters.
But just creatures, though. Only off of creatures.
Yeah, but if they have a -1 counter, you could save them from dying, and that's kind of something. But or if you had a flying token, not a flying token, a flying counter or anything. But
That's true.
yeah, I mean, no, I'd be ready to move on. But what else we got?
I gotta say one last thing. Zach, I'm sorry about disrespecting Trading Post. I meant to say Staff of Domination, so no disrespect.
Oh. It's okay. Honestly, this looks pretty similar to both of them, and I love both of them dearly. The comparison had to be made. You gotta break some eggs or whatever. But Fane, even his name is kind of boring, But yeah, that brings us to the next card.
Who is up?
I think it is you, Guy.
Oh gosh.
But I could take this one if you want.
Go for it. I'd be a little more interested in the next card.
Okay, perfect. So this is Combat Calligrapher, 3 and a white for a 3/3 creature bird cleric. It has flying, and it says Inklings can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. Whenever a player attacks one of your opponents, that attacking player creates a tapped 2/1 white and black Inkling creature token with flying that's attacking that opponent. So, I honestly, this reminds me a lot of Nil's Discipline Enforcer, in that it's going to be fine for a long time until it's not. And eventually those Inklings are going to come home to roost, and all that is preventing your opponents from killing you with them is basically whether the Calligrapher dies to Doomblade. And spoilers, it does.
I hate this card so much. There's no upside really to giving your opponents the Inklings. I wish that there was some kind of way to either you get an emblem that prevents all damage from the Inklings. But I agree with you, Zach. I agree with you, Nick. Once this bird is gone, you're done. Goodbye. I'm done.
No, that's just the thing. This was the card like when I was reading through all the spoilers for this list, this was the card I got to, and I'm like, so does this deck? All the Silverquill deck does is help the Quandrix deck win. Like if you like if you open up all of the decks and like you and some friends sit down to play like commander decks out of the box, then all the Silverquill deck does is like Kingmake for the Quandrix deck. And we haven't talked about the Quandrix deck yet, but like it gives the Quandrix deck tokens, it pumps the Quandrix deck's creatures, it like will give them cards, like and all of things that the Quandrix deck is doing, but like it doubles them. Like the Quandrix deck doubles tokens, doubles card draw, like just two of. So like what the hell was this deck doing and what is this guy doing? And like it's so frustrating to see that they spent rare slots, especially rare slots in white, which is like the color that has been the meme color that like everyone wants to talk about for forever, on this, like it's so frustrating.
Yeah, I think that like so many of these Silverquill cards just kind of count on your opponents like being dumb, like not understanding like how the cards work or like what their incentives are.
Yeah.
Because it's not like Combat Calligrapher doesn't say never attack me. It says like get as many Inklings as you possibly can, like farm the Inklings and then kill Combat Calligrapher. That's the actual text box of Combat Calligrapher. If you like shine a UV light, like a black light on Combat Calligrapher, that's what you're going to see when you read it.
Oh my god. That is a... Yeah. No, I agree. Don't play this card outside of the precon. That's all I'm going to say. Even if you're playing the precon, don't play this card.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, Group Hug is like...
Here's our upgrade guide. Here's the like official Commander Theory upgrade guide for Silverquill statement. Take out every card designed by Sheldon Menery.
Oh my god.
and then put in like just the top 20 like Orzhov cards on EDH rec. That's how you win with this precon.
I mean, a lot of the cards we talked about in the Strixhaven set, though, I would still consider running. Like, it's almost like if you take out 20 of these cards and you put in 20 of those cards, that would still be a little better. Just because those at least are kind of, we talked about those two instant speed removals. We got the dragon, which was, not the best, but like still better.
Yeah, it's like political, but you can still build around it.
Yeah. Ooh, okay. Well,
the spice is flowing.
I'm sorry, you got. I'm most of the way through this enormous like 10 ABV beer, and you're getting to see my real thoughts on Silverquill statement. Yeah.
Well, no, it's okay because that's what this podcast is for, and I can't wait to do the other 3 decks later. But let's keep going with this one because this is a lot of fun. We got Guardian Archon, which is 4 white creature Archon. Flying, as it enters the battlefield, secretly choose an opponent. Reveal the player you chose. You and target permanent you control each gain protection from the chosen player until end of turn. Activate only once. What do we think? I hate asking that because I kind of know what everyone thinks, but what do we think?
Because you can see the show notes.
Hasn't there been like a red card that also does a similar effect where like you secretly choose an opponent?
Yeah. It's like an Ifrit.
Yeah, there's an Ifrit, and then there's also the
Stalking Leonin
Stalker. Yeah, Stalking Leonin. So this is a thing that they print every now and then in these commander decks because it's like a funny activation cost.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, it is Emissary of Grudges for all the people listening at home. If you want to, honestly, it's like very extremely similar in what it does.
Yeah, it really is, and I think that's the biggest point about this card is that this is basically just a 6-mana fog. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would run this over fog. I'm not a very big fan of fog effects, and this is a 5/5 flyer, so it like can kill them. So that has that going for it. I think the coolest thing about this card is that it was it's a Scott M. Fisher painting, and watching his video on YouTube of like painting this, it's one of those paintings where like you see him paint it and you're like, what, like how are you, what, that's not, and then you see it done and you're like, that shouldn't look like what it looks like that you made a bunch of squiggles and
Witchcraft.
now there's a guy on an owl, but like it shouldn't look like that, but it does. How do you do that? Like that's the coolest part about this card to me.
I really think that 6 mana is just like an absurd amount for this effect. Like this is basically what not even a shelter. What's like 1 mana something games protection, like an Apostle's Blessing or something?
Yeah, something like that.
So yeah, it's cool that you can like play it in advance and like flip it when you need it, or like reveal the chosen player when you need it. But you can also just pay like a single mana for exactly the same effect, and I feel like that'll be a lot more efficient even if you can't do it in advance. Like I'm just not super stoked to have this like 5/5 flying beater, which in a lot of games isn't enormously relevant.
Yeah.
When I could pay 1 mana and get the exact same thing.
Like there are multiple Archons, and like there are other Archons with better effects that I'd actually play EDH.
Like Archon of Coronation, which is what we saw in Commander Legends. 4 white, you know, when it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. That kind of card. Yeah. No, that card was also pretty bad. So don't play either of these. Outside of the pre-con.
Yeah, the next card is actually I'm not upset about. I'm actually happy it exists.
Okay, yeah. Give us some good news, Zach.
Oh yeah, I can be the emissary of good news. So this next card is called Promise of Loyalty, and as I just said, I'm actually happy it exists. This is a sorcery. It costs 4 and a white. Each player puts a vow counter on a creature they control and sacrifices the rest. Each of those creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control for as long as it has a vow counter on it. So I actually like this because this is like, I'm a political card, but it's not actually like, it's not like Combat Calligrapher where they can like Doomblade it and attack you. Like this is just like, okay, yeah, you all keep a thing and you can all attack each other. Go for it. You know, like don't attack me. Like this isn't actually a political card. Like if I was someone with a vow counter on one of my creatures and you wrath the rest of my board, I'd be like, well that sucks, but I'm gonna still attack. So if I can't attack you, I'm gonna attack over there. So like this isn't even like actually a political card. This was like trying to be a political card, it seems like, and actually is just like something I would like to do. Because one of the problems with wraths is that they can make the game take a little bit longer than you might want. This keeps the game moving, but you don't die in the process.
Well, I hate it just because Blake runs Sigarda, and this will not affect him at all.
Haha, fuck you.
But
well, no, you won't be able to get attacked by Sigarda.
No, I mean, but they can't sacrifice it.
Yeah, he can't sacrifice anything, so he can put his counter on whatever.
Yeah, he puts the counter on Elvish Mystic is what happens.
That's
something like that. Yeah. So
yeah,
go fuck yourself, guy.
Yeah, this is a bad card in my meta. But that's my meta. In your meta, anyone's meta, it might be okay. I don't know.
Yeah.
In terms of like mono white playability, no. That's all I had to say. All right.
I would push back and say that I don't think it's completely no. I think, like you just mentioned, like if you do have a Sigarda in your meta, it's probably not worth it. But in most metas, like people want to attack, and like if you give someone's like Baneslayer the ability to attack, but just not you, they'll probably just do it.
That's true.
So this is just a way to clear the board, keep yourself safe, and not piss everyone off.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm fine with this card. It's not necessarily something I'm clamoring to put into every white deck, but I don't actually think this is a terrible card like a lot of the other ones we've talked about today.
Okay. If we're already good, we can move on to our next card.
Oh yeah, so we got Scholarship Sponsor, 3 in white for a 3/3 creature human advisor. When it enters the battlefield, each player who controls fewer lands than the player who controls the most lands searches their library for a number of basic land cards, less than or equal to the difference, puts those cards onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffles. So does anyone want to interpret that paragraph of text for me?
Oh, I don't. Please. Not me.
So again, it's like another catch-up mechanic white card, right? It's like, oh, your opponents are ahead, you catch up to them.
It's not
kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it's catch up in terms of like, I can catch up, but I'm also going to have everyone catch up with me.
True.
Which is not great, because I feel like white's biggest disadvantage is, it is sometimes behind and you want it to catch up, but, letting everyone catch up with you, I don't know.
It's group
there's
hug.
better
Come
options.
on.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think there's just better options for this.
Yeah, I think I'd much rather be casting a Keeper of the Accord or a Knight of the White Orchid, or just something that only helps me rather than helping multiple people who are not me.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard about this cool card called Archaeomancer's Map.
Crazy.
Oh yeah,
You might have heard of it. Yeah, it was in like the Lorehold Commander deck.
If only there was an episode we could
pretty
watch
cool.
on the Commander Theory podcast that talks about it.
No, you can watch it on
Or
the
the
Wizard
Wizard
Staff
Staff one.
podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, that one too.
Yeah. That's a pretty good podcast, I heard.
Some people say so.
But yeah, this is just not a card I'm looking to play. Like, I understand that white ketchup is like a thing. Not like Heinz ketchup, but like
yes, of course.
like
Thank you.
cards that yeah, just to clarify. But this just doesn't the fact that this is the cool thing about the white mechanics that help you catch up to your opponents is that it's just you. The fact that this is everybody makes me feel very bad on my tummy, I'm like, no. This was for me and now everyone gets it? Bad.
Yeah. No, that's the thing. Like, white is the color of fairness. And what's like, honestly, like, if white were to win the game, people could claim that white was being unfair.
Oh,
but if white loses,
don't even get me started.
If white loses, nobody's going to claim that white's being unfair. Clearly, it was an equal and just system. Otherwise, they wouldn't have lost.
Oh, dear Lord. Gotta talk about this next card.
Okay.
Please bring us on home.
All right, so we got Author of Shadows, 4 and a black, creature, Shade Warlock. I feel like we don't often see the Shade creature type. I had to look it up for a moment to be like, is this
Warlock.
the first one?
Let's not have a conversation about the Warlock creature type.
I don't want to.
That's
get
what's
into that.
that's what's funny is like listening to your guys' podcast. You guys really care a lot about subtypes of permanence specifically.
Yes. We do. If your listeners want to hear a lot about the Warlock creature type, just pick a random episode of Commander.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Yeah. You should read this card and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, I was about to say this card has a whole bunch. This has a paragraph more of text that let me read first. So when it enters the battlefield, exile all cards from an opponent's graveyard. So, it's a Bajuka block. Choose a non-land card exiled this way. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast that spell.
I mean, it's a lot of words for like not actually a lot of gameplay,
Yeah.
which is the theme of the Silverquill deck.
I mean, what was their motto? Like words, words, words.
Yeah, it was like say a lot of things and then die to your opponent's Doomblade. I
Yeah.
think was
Yes.
the motto. Yeah, no, this is like, I think people just like graveyard hate. This is something that I've noticed. Like they reprinted Angel of Finality, which is just a 3/4 flyer for 4 that it enters the battlefield and exiles a graveyard. That's like not really a card that I want to play, and yet like it does see some play. Like people play like Tormod's Crypt. They'll play. I mean, I play Nile Spellbomb, but that's because it replaces itself. Like Bajuka Bogs and a lot of things. People like being able to host graveyards. The problem is that you kind of want to do it at instant speed. You want to hit things like before someone reanimates something or before someone combos out. This doesn't do that.
Yeah, I agree that you want your. Well, I'll say that I think the reason that Nile Spellbomb and Bajuka Bog are so good and why they see so much play in this format is because they don't really cost you a card. Like Bajuka Bog is taking the place of a swamp. It's not really a burden on you to run it. And that's also true for Nile Spellbomb, yeah, it's kind of like taking a card slot, but it replaces itself. It's instant speed, or like Scavenger Grounds. That's also just like taking a land slot. It's really unobtrusive. It's not a burden to run any of those effects. And what I think the designer of the Silverquill deck may not grasp is just that like exiling cards from your opponent's graveyard isn't something you want to spend 5 mana for. It's not something you want to spend a card on. It's not something you necessarily want to do at sorcery speed. That's how I feel about Author of Shadows.
Yeah, I think there's just so many better cards in black that can kind of do the same thing. Like, I don't know why I wouldn't just want to run like Praetor's Grasp. I mean, that seems a lot better to just go and like search out a card that I would want to play rather than like, have to wait until it's in the graveyard to be able to play.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say if you want to play things out of the graveyard, there's like Puppeteer Click. There's
Sepulchral Primordial.
Primordial. There's it's from Mirage. The Ashes. It's the 4 mana reanimate something from an opponent's graveyard.
Ashen Powder, man, that's a deep cut.
Yeah, Ashen Powder. Like, there's just so many.
I mean, are you sure you don't want to say like Bone Dancer? Like that, even
yeah,
that's
Bone
like
Dancer is one. That was actually. Yeah, Bone Dancer is definitely one. Like, there's just so many more cards that do like graveyard hosing, but I get more out of it than this card is offering you. And that's not even to talk about like why it's both of these creature types. So I'm pretty down on this card. 5 mana is not like Gonti exists. Like Gonti is 4 mana and does more or less like a very similar thing, and like is a lot more relevant of a body on the battlefield. So it's just not something that I'm interested in.
Oh, it is my turn to read the next card.
Yeah, we got a lot of more powerful Silverquill cards to talk about.
Indeed.
Yeah,
indeed.
we actually
Let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, this is for sure. Here, what do you think the over/under is on like number of EDH recs? Sorry, number of decks on EDH rec that are going to be running this next card within a year. Would you?
I mean, it's got to be 20,000, right? Like,
yeah. Honestly, that seems on the low end to me. But all right, let me just give you all a taste of this. Let me read this off for you. This is Bold Plagiarist. 3 and a black for a 2/2 creature vampire rogue with flash. Whenever an opponent puts one or more counters on a creature they control, they put the same number and kind of counters on Bold Plagiarist. Would you say this is like, maybe niche powerhouse or format staple, or like how many of these are you planning to pick up when the format when the set goes live on like TCG Player? How many of these how many play sets do you think you'll need?
-5.
Hold on. I'm kind of confused. Why didn't they name this card Jason Felix?
Oh.
Not to like.
There
Some
we go.
spicy,
There we go.
spicy
Topical
commentary
burn.
there. That's good. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I just thought of it on the spot, and now I'm going to tweet about it here in a second. No, this card's bad. That's all I have to add to this.
Yeah. No, I don't really have much to say about this other than like this, like the name of this card is like actually really cool. Like Bold Plagiarist, you're like, what? It has flash. It could do so many things. Like it could copy things. It could steal something. It could do so many things. And then you read it and you're like, oh,
I know. Like, just think. This is in like. I think we knew the name early. I think this might have actually been one of Maro's teasers, and like
oh yeah.
seeing that, you think like, oh man, maybe this is like
A good
another
card.
hole breacher. Yeah, like something that actually has something to do with a card plagiarized. Like, oh, my opponents try to draw a bunch of cards. Nope, I get those cards instead. But instead, it's a very narrow, very narrow ability. I'm not sure what kind of metagame the designer of this deck plays in where this ability is going to be relevant, but on my commander tables, I don't think that Bold Plagiarist is going to be triggering very often.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it would have been better if it somehow just stopped your opponents from getting counters on their cards and it only going on Bold Plagiarist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That I would see being a better card that I would want to play, because it would just kind of hose some decks. But in the way that it, your opponents are still going to be getting those counters. I'm just going to happen to be copying them as well. I'm not as inclined to still allow them to do that for the amount of mana that I'm paying.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's like intended to be used specifically in the stock C21 pre-con meta, where it's like, oh, you put a bunch of counters on your fractal, where they're going over here too. but that is like such a narrow use case. Like in the wide, like you have exactly 81 new cards to introduce into the format with your commander precons, and I really think that this might be the only opportunity in a year. Well, I guess we have like the Kaldheim and like the Zendikar precons that have like a handful of cards, but really this is the biggest injection of cards purely targeted at commander for the entire year. And so I think that they have to do something that like really improves the format in some way, whereas Bold Plagiarist, I just don't think it does anything.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Well, we've gone from one banger to another. Do we want to move on to the next banger?
Yes.
Yeah, this one actually has applications.
Yeah, kind of.
Is it something? Is this my turn?
It is your turn.
Oh, nice. Okay, I'm just gonna talk for a long time.
Do it.
Now. So, Cunning Rhetoric is an enchantment. It costs 3 mana, 2 and a black. Whenever an opponent attacks you and or one or more planeswalkers you control, exile the top card of that player's library. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. So, this kind of looks like a Pillow Fort effect, but it's not. I actually am higher on this card than a lot of the cards that we've talked about. Given that like your playgroup is like kind of does chip damage, to use that fighting game term, like you are going to end up drawing a few cards off of this probably. And like I said, that is if your playgroup does chip damage, we'll be like, hey, you're open, I'll send my 2/2 flyer at you, and or it will deter that. But I think one of the things is like, unlike a Ghostly Prison, if you're telling your opponent they can't do something, like they kind of get more upset about that, where this is like, yeah, you could attack me, but then I get to basically draw the top card of your library.
Nah.
Yeah, that's a little bit different. This might be like not quite the removal magnet that other Pillowfoot cards are, because where like one card is like, you can't do this. This is like, well, I'll get something. It's not as threatening and yet gives you an advantage. So in that regard, I'm a lot higher on this card than pretty much every other card we've talked about, with the exception of that Wrath. But yeah, how do you all feel about this?
I generally don't like cards that sort of give my opponents choices and where my opponents choose if it actually does anything. But I do like this more than Ghostly Prison. I think you're right that it's going to be less annoying to people. It's going to draw less anger.
Yeah, there's one point I want to say too, that the actual place where I think this is relevant, and this is actually thanks to Alex Whiteclay for positing this and incepting it into my brain, is Super Friends list. Like, people kind of have to attack your planeswalkers in a Super Friends list to keep things manageable, and just playing this means that like you might not stop them from attacking your planeswalkers, but you're gonna get a bunch of value as they do it.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that I was going to add to this is I think that this is a much better Author of Shadows. I think.
Oh, that card we just talked about?
Yeah, that card that we just talked about. Like, rewind maybe 12 minutes or so. I think it's weird that, you put in a card that costs so much less mana and is just better all around, and then you decide, oh yeah, I'm also going to include Author of Shadows. Like, there wasn't some kind of incentive to create something better in that place, whereas, Cunning Rhetoric kind of does this same idea better. Yeah, not to say that I think that I would run this card in outside of the precon still, but it's still just a better card in general. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this next card we have is Incarnation Technique. It is 4 and a black for a sorcery that says Demonstrate. So we all know what Demonstrate does. Mill 5 cards. Then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is kind of a reanimation spell. However, it's 5 mana, which is a lot. And an additional arguable downside is the fact that this says Demonstrate. So your opponents get to do this too. So I don't know about you fellas, I'm not too high on this card.
I'm actually higher on this card than I am a lot of the other Demonstrate cards. Like, this is one of the axes in which your opponents might not be playing on. Like, not everyone at the table might be playing a recursion deck, and so you going, I'm gonna get back my It That Betrays and, like, I don't know, like Terastodon. And you can get back your Llanowar Elf. Like, that seems like a lot more likely with this card than it does with a lot of the other cards. And there's a lot of decks that want to mill 10. And like, Rise from the Grave is 5 mana. This is, even just when you're not demonstrating, better than Rise from the Grave in a lot of lists, like milling 5 and then reanimating something. Like, you probably don't want to cast this when you don't have a target already, but milling 5 is a benefit to it. So I'm higher on this than a lot of the other Demonstrate cards we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I agree with Zach there, where the decks that probably want to run this want to run this, but I don't think it's a little more niche in that way, where I wouldn't run this, in just any mono black deck. And I do think that the ability to demonstrate and give your opponents the option to reanimate something isn't as much of a downside as it would be for you to be able to copy that a second time, to be able to mill 10 cards, likely be able to reanimate 2 things that you want to reanimate, whereas your opponent, will probably just get some stupid mana dork that's not going to matter as much as you do getting back Villas or Blightsteel Colossus.
Big thing. Because also, like, there's probably Yeah, Blightsteel. There's also someone at the table who might be playing like a Talrand or something, and in that case, like, what are they getting back? Like, it could be nothing. It just seems like more likely that this doesn't actually help your opponent.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah.
Do we already want to move on to banger number 7 or whatever? I've
let's
lost
do
count.
it. Yeah, this is you, right? This is for this next one.
This one's a doozy. I'll be interested to hear everyone's thoughts. We got Keen Duelist, 1 in a black, creature, human wizard. This text might remind you of another card, but let me see if you figure it out. At the beginning of your upkeep, you and target opponent each reveal the top card of your library. You each lose life equal to the mana value of the card revealed by the other player. You put the card you revealed into your hand. So you reveal a card with 5 mana value, your opponent reveals a card with 3 mana value. You take 3 life, they take 5 life. Kind of like the TLDR of this. Mm-hmm. So who does this remind us of?
Bob Marr.
Yeah,
Bob Belcher?
There he is.
Bob Ross?
No, yeah, the championship winner. Oh, Bob, the now I can't remember his actual
Dark Confidant.
Dark Confidant.
Dark Confidant. Yeah, there you go. Definitely. I also like how in Strixhaven they don't have Hamilton, so they still do duels because they don't know that that's probably a bad thing to do. Yeah, I mean, the initial thought I had about this was that Rakdos 2.0, Rakdos Lord of Riots, is a pretty good place for this because not only are you drawing a card, you're probably doming them for like 6 to 9 mana. You're also triggering Rakdos and like letting you be able to cast him, period. So that's somewhere where I would think to play this card.
Yeah, that makes the most sense for me.
Yeah, I think outside of the precons, Yuriko is another good place, just because, top deck manipulation, dealing a lot of damage, and likely you'll be putting that card back on the top of your library anyways, just to be able to deal a lot of damage there.
Oh,
pretty good. But again, this is just one of those kind of cards where I feel like it's just not going to see much play outside of the precon, because outside of like these precons which are built for the 4 to 5 level power, you don't really want to be giving your opponents that kind of card advantage or giving them more answers. I think based on how it's worded, you can choose your opponent, so it's not always you don't have to like commit to one opponent, so you can always kind of choose who's further behind.
This card is just not something that most decks want. Like this is what I was gonna say. Sorry, I've been drinking.
Shocker.
Duskmantle Seer is not. Duskmantle Seer is not a format staple, and I doubt that this will be, even though the downside has been mitigated somewhat. Duskmantle Seer being the like 4/4 flyer Dimir card from Return to Ravnica block, and everybody gets a bob. If that's not like good enough, then I don't really think this will be good enough.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. Yeah, this is just I'm probably like too drunk to think through this properly, but there might actually, I feel like you could design a commander that could somehow reward you for like all these dumb political effects that like give your opponents cards and mana. I feel like there is possibly a way to design that commander right, but just like putting a whole bunch of cards in your deck and like making the deck's theme like giving away resources like isn't really like a strategy, isn't something cohesive. It's not something that's like rewarded in the game mechanics.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's very hard to punish put into your hand effects. It's really easy to punish draw effects, but not so much put into your hand directly.
Yeah, I mean, like I like when Commander, when there are like more distinct archetypes, or rather, I like when there are commanders that like specifically reward you for doing something, and like create this like incentive or this like subsidy that makes it so that you can introduce all these cards into the format that otherwise wouldn't be playable. Like Feather, because Feather exists, you can play all these dumb like 1 mana combat trick cantrips. But I what I enjoy less is like these archetypes where people are just putting a bunch of cards that do the same thing into the same deck, and there's no real like reason or incentive or like benefit to doing so. And I feel like that's what this politics deck is. Like, yeah, there is a theme in that so many of these cards give away resources, but there's no reason to be doing this other than like I guess I really enjoy losing.
Yeah, if there were more cards, designed in this deck that kind of punished your opponent for, having more creatures, having more cards, because that's what you're kind of doing, is just giving them more of everything, really, and it's not giving you any kind of like advantage over them.
Yeah. Like if there was a smothering tithe in this deck, then like, oh, it kind of makes sense. Like Brina allows them to draw a card, sure, but then I also get to create a treasure. Like things that trigger off of your opponents getting additional resources, and then okay, yeah, I'll give them additional resources, but I get stuff in exchange. That would make more sense. But there is no smothering tithe. There's not cards in this deck that like synergize with the giving away of the cards. It's just the things that help your opponents to kill you faster.
Yep.
Yeah, we got 3 more cards to talk about.
Yeah, and 2 of these are not terrible.
Yeah, true.
Like one of these cards I'm actually excited about.
That actually is the card I'm going to be reading off. It is Stinging Study, 4 and a black for an instant. You draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is the mana value of a commander you own on the battlefield or in the command zone. I gotta say, this looks to me like a new format staple.
Nick, can you read it again? Read it again for me, Nick.
Oh, you draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is the mana value of a commander you own on the battlefield or in the command zone.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's so
It's
good.
very good.
It's so good.
I don't know if I'm missing something. Why are you excited about this? I'm sorry.
And Nick can tell you.
So just in terms of just like comparing this to other black card draw effects, I'd say this is probably in top 5, given that you have a commander that costs 4 CMC or more, or rather 4 mana value or higher. Because like, okay, yeah, you've got your like Necropotence and your Ad Nauseam as like the very top tier of black card draw effects, but it really does drop off after that. Like, you've like when you start bringing in like Midnight Bargain and Promise of Power and Liliana's Contract, like all of those things kind of don't measure up very well to a Stinging Study for like X equals 4 or more.
Okay, yeah, I can see that, I guess. Yeah, I can get on board a little more with this card. This isn't like unlike a lot of the other cards that we've talked about, I don't see them really being run outside of this pre-con deck, but this one I could see popping up a little more often.
Yeah, I'm going to be picking up a couple copies of this. Like I bought one of each pre-con, like pre-order sight unseen, but I'm going to be picking up a couple. I know. I did. Fortunately, after I saw the deck list, I found a buyer for the Silverquill. Silverquill deck. But in addition to just like buying the pre-cons, I am going to be picking up a couple copies of Stinging Study because I really do think it's good.
Yeah. I mean, like, imagine a scenario you're like a black X partner list, but one of your partners is like an Achroma. At end of turn, draw 7, lose 7. Like that's insane. Like that's so good. So it just really seems to me like this is an effect that like black has technically had access to, but not at this level for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
And that being said, I think we can move on to this next one. This next one's kind of a doozy too.
Yeah. Who's up? Is it you?
I think it's me. Yeah, that's me. So this is Ink Shield. This is an instant. It costs 3 white black. It has the it has the rules text. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to you this turn. For each 1 damage prevented this way, create a 2/1 white and black inkling creature token with flying. So something to be said about this. 5 mana is a lot for a combat trick, but if you ever pull this off, whoo boy, that's spicy.
Yeah, I definitely want to be running this in a list that has alternative things to do with its mana on opponents' turns. Like the
Yeah.
nightmare scenario is, in my black-white deck with like no ramp, where like 5 mana is actually a really significant chunk of my tempo. I hold up the Ink Shield, and then like the aggro deck decides to go at a different player. So I don't cast this, I get nothing, and that all is pretty terrible. But if you're running a deck like, say, Daxos the Returned or Gen, something that either like has a lot of instants or has a commander with an activated ability that can like utilize all that unspent mana if you aren't able to cast Ink Shield, then I think it could be a pretty good card.
100% agree. I have played things like this before. Like one of my favorite white cards is Comeuppance, which is 4 mana, like prevent all combat damage that would be, or prevent all damage that would be dealt to you and your permanents this turn. If it was a creature that was dealing the damage, deal that damage to the creature. If it was a spell, deal it to the spell's controller. So like it just redirects all the damage dealt to you to like whoever was trying to damage you. I've tried to play that card in a lot of different lists, and it's been really good in lists that were like instant heavy, had activated abilities, like Nick said, and it was really like I never cast it in decks that were like, I'm gonna tap out on my turn. So that's what Ink Shield reminds me of, is like this is gonna be a lot like Comeuppance. If I am playing a deck that wants to activate stuff at instant speed, that wants to respond to people, Ink Shield's probably worth it. It's probably going to do a lot. If I'm playing a deck that wants to just tap out for Debtor's Knell on my turn, I probably don't want to be running Ink Shield.
This kind of reminds me of Arachnogenesis, which is a green card that has recently gone up in price a little because it's like a fog effect where you then get to create a bunch of like a bunch of spider tokens, but here you're creating.
Boy, howdy has it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The downside to this card is it does cost more mana to kind of like keep up, but Arachnogenesis is creeping up in price, so I feel like this is kind of a good secondary effect that could possibly see play outside of the pre-con.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally true. I would not be surprised if I saw an Ink Shield outside of the pre-con where a lot of these cards, I'd be surprised if I saw them. But that being said, we have one more Silverquill card for the
Who wants
day.
to read it?
And who boy?
Oh man, please let me. If it's on offer, I'll take it.
Do it.
Oh
yeah.
The honor is yours, Nick.
Oh, I love it. All right, this is Tempting Contract. 4 mana for an artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent may create a treasure token. For each opponent who does, you create a treasure token. Who here is tempted? Who's tempted to pick up a bunch of copies of Tempting Contract and put them into their commander decks? Please tell me.
I'm tempted to never talk about this card again after we're done today.
You know what, Guy? I think I agree with you. I think I'm going to explode right now and or let Nick do that and be done with it forever, you know?
So, like, I've seen some people defending this on Twitter. And I mean, because, like, there's a lot of people who immediately say, if your opponents are smart, this is never going to do anything. I'm in that camp. But I've also seen people on Twitter saying like, no, if you're just dismissing this, you're not considering like the prisoner's dilemma situation, because like, your opponents are all going to agree not to do it, and then one of them is going to defect. Okay, and they're going to take that treasure on that first upkeep, and then like the agreement is just going to be like destroyed, and then everyone's going to be taking the treasure, and you get to reap the benefits. But here's what you need to consider: like, compare Tempting Contract to like probably like one of the worst four cost mana rocks like legal in the format. Compare it to like a Sisay's Ring, which sees play in 3,476 decks on EDH Rec. Similarly, Urgolem's Eye sees play in a cool like 3,896 decks. Definitely like not highly adopted cards. So Sisay's Ring costs 4 mana, will generate 2 mana immediately. You don't have to wait until your first upkeep to do it. You can start casting spells that very first turn. Like, the net mana cost of a Sisay's Ring is basically 2, whereas Tempting Contract, you don't get anything until the whole round of turns passes. And like, okay, let's believe that prisoner's dilemma scenario. So okay, like in terms of like the progression of mana from casting Tempting Contract is 0 mana first turn, 1 mana on the second turn, and then maybe 3 mana on the third turn, after which you've also given away a total of 4 mana to your opponents. And then let's just like compare Sisay's Ring, where you cast it for 4, immediately get 2 mana. Next turn, immediately get 2 mana. Third turn, immediately get 2 mana. And how many mana have you given away to your opponents across that entire stretch? Donut. Goose egg 0. So please tell me, in what world would this card, which, to me, as like a very, an ignorant person coming to Commander with fresh eyes, I'm picking up my pre-con for the first time. This will be me dipping my toe into the format. In what world would I like see this and want to run it over Sisay's Ring or Urgolem's Eye or any of these other 4-cost mana rocks that nobody ever plays in Commander? Like, this is much worse than several cards which are too bad to play because there's so many good alternatives.
Just snap my finger. Just...
Golf clap. You nailed
Shit.
it there.
Yeah. The only thing I'm gonna add to this is that, like, when I had a Kega the Tidestar list, I played every single mana rock that cost 4 and made 2 because that generated it pushed me from 4 to 6, right? So I could play Kega. Most commanders, especially good commanders these days, are not that expensive, and if I was playing Kega, I would not play Tempting Contract, because unlike Urgolem's Eye, I'm not guaranteed to be able to play Kega the next turn.
Yes. Snapping.
Just like, there's just no possible universe in which like playing this card lets me execute on my gameplay on the turn after. So what have I done? I basically discarded a card and spent 4 mana and passed the turn to like do anything at the like whims of my opponents. Like, why would I do that? Like, if I really wanted the mana, I would just play Sisay's Ring, which has way better art.
I know, yeah. Donata Giancola really flexing his ability to draw hands.
Yeah, and you know what I found out? This is a complete tangent, but I just found out that Giancola was Volkan Baga's teacher.
Whoa.
Which is one of the reasons why Volkan Baga
also
is so good
at drawing hands.
Exactly. So did not know that. Makes a lot of sense. But I can't imagine a world in which this is the thing that I'm excited to cast.
Nick, I'll let you go first before
thank
I
you.
say my
I'll try to be really quick here. Which is just to say that, like, Zach, I think you really hit the nail on the head. I think that with ramp, it is really, really important that it be reliable. like when you're casting ramp, especially in the early game, like you have a plan in mind. Like I am going to cast this Hedron Archive on turn 4, and then I'll have 7 mana on turn 5, and this is exactly how I'm going to do it. And like barring disruption, you know, like you need to be able to plan out multiple turns in advance in Commander, and of course you got to be a little bit flexible. You got to be like when removal happens, when interaction happens, you may need to like improvise. But in order to plan out your turns, multiple turns in advance, you need to have reliable effects. And yes, Tempting Contract has this massive, this like pie in the sky, magical Christmas land possibility where you cast it and it's just like a cheaper Gilded Lotus. Never mind the fact that your opponents are also getting free mana. Please ignore that part. But the fact that it couldn't be that, the fact that it might be something other than that, means that you can't effectively plan what you're going to do next turn. It just completely disrupts any like ability to really strategize. And I'll let you go, Guy. I know you've been waiting really patiently.
No, because you know I don't like to admit this, but I'm going to admit this right now. I am a dumbass. I totally read this card completely wrong.
No way.
Shut up, Blake. Shut up. Okay, so here's what I thought. I thought, because like I'm now just reading the card and I'm like, oh, okay, Tempting Contract does not work the way that I thought. So I'm kind of curious though, because I think the way that I thought it works would be much better, and I'm interested to see if you guys think the same way. So I thought it worked in the way that at the beginning of each upkeep, whoever is that turn except you would then create a treasure token. So let's say it's the next person. At the beginning of the upkeep, they may create a treasure token, and then you also get to create a treasure token. So that way it's like, you know, at the beginning of every player's turn, before you create a treasure token, they would get to create a treasure token, and for everyone who did take that, you would then get to create a treasure token. And I actually think that would be a lot better because it kind of incentivizes the player to take the token then instead of at the beginning of their turn where then you get like all that mana at once. It seems like a better deal for whoever at the beginning of the turn to just give 1 mana instead of letting, you know, you at the beginning of your upkeep create 3.
That would also be better because it actually has the potential to refund some of the cost of Tempting Contract in the same way that like the net cost of Urgolem's Eye and the net cost of Sisay's Ring is really 2 mana. Like if it's something that triggers on your opponent's upkeeps, you could potentially like get 3 mana back that same turn and actually use it. Like, okay, great. I'm going to get 1 mana on opponent A's upkeep, 1 mana on opponent B's upkeep, 1 mana on opponent C's upkeep. And then when opponent C tries to pull some crap, I'm going to disallow it. You know, I'll use my treasures to stop it. That definitely would be better. It would be harder to evaluate how that looked. I mean, so if that card existed, it'd certainly be better than Tempting Contract. I don't know like if I would play it, but it wouldn't be like obviously terrible in the way that Tempting Contract is.
Yeah, I think I would say the same thing. I still would not play that in my Kega list, but I think you would probably be able to finagle more mana out of it the way that you said it.
Yeah, I mean, again, I read the card wrong, and I kind of like assumed that's the way it worked. But then as we started talking, I was like, let me read this card again. And I was like, oh, wow, this is like not what I thought. But
yeah, it's just not good.
If any wizard staff that isn't, you know, part of the wizard staff, not the podcast, you know, the ones who actually work for Wizards of the Coast, listens to this. Yeah, Watsy, please take that design. Like, it's yours. Like, you know.
Oh yeah, I do that. I wish like when we do custom card episodes that they'll like secretly listen and steal them sometimes. I'm like, please, like these would be so much cooler. Please.
Oh yeah, I like want to say any wizard staff that ever listens to any episode of Commander Theory, I give up I give up ownership of any design
All
that
legal
I
ownership.
put forth. Yes, I will.
Yeah,
I will never sue
exactly.
you because the world in which that exists as a Magic card is much better than the one we currently exist as.
Yes. My drunk
Say that.
word on a podcast is hereby formal legality.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go. You heard it here first, folks.
All
Well,
right.
we're almost at 3 hours, so I think we're going to close out here. And I guess that
Yeah.
means we're just going to have to stay tuned for a part 2 where we go over the Prismari, Quandrix, and Witherbloom decks for Commander 2021. So, Nick and Zach, where can our listeners find you?
That's a great question. You can follow us on Twitter at Commander Theory. You can also follow us on Tumblr at Commander Theory. And you can find us on YouTube at Commander Theory. And of course, this podcast, or maybe not this podcast, our podcast is hosted on Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcast, you'll be able to find us.
Yeah, Spotify, all that good stuff.
Yep. Awesome. And we want to thank you guys very much for doing this collaboration with you guys. It's been a lot of fun. We're going to look forward to part 2. And also a big shout out to your friend Alex, who was a big part in writing some of the notes for these episodes. You know, great to have as many perspectives as we can doing these. Yeah. We're going to close out here, and, you know, we'll talk about the other decks, as I mentioned, and probably the best new commander and best new 99 card in our next episode. So stay tuned.
Oh, yes. I cannot wait until next episode. You know, it's been a lot of fun being on the podcast. Thank you again for hosting us. And I also am really looking forward to the wrap up where we get to talk about our most favorite deck out of these Commander 2021 decks, and of course our least favorite deck. That'll be a lot of good fun too.
I mean, we already know
Nice.
Tempting Contract's the best 99 card, so we'll have to think of a different best 99 card. So thank you very much for listening. We are the Wizard Staff Podcast. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to your podcasts. We are on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook at WizardStaff101. You can send us an email at thewizardstaff101@gmail.com if you want to bitch and complain about how stupid we are. We thank you very much for listening, and we hope you have a great night. We'll see you again soon. Peace.
Peace.